And it's my pleasure to introduce Vince Bryden to you. Vince is a CRM black belt at Microsoft. And basically what that means is he knows more than 99.9% of the planet. He knows more about CRM, more than 99.9% of the people on the planet. He's the expert. So I had the pleasure of working with Vince for the last few years, and he was our go-to for the best practices of how to implement CRM. So the users, such as sales and service, the real everyday users of CRM, can get the most value out of the CRM. Today, he's going to talk to us about some of those best practices and some emerging technologies that are coming out in the industry. So with that.
Thank you very much. So is there supposed to be music coming through as well? Thank you. So as introduced, my name is Vince Bryden. So I work in Microsoft as part of their worldwide Dynamics group. And what I'm going to talk about today is usually this is the point, certainly as an introduction to Dynamics, where somebody would kind of give you a little bit of our roadmap. And I'm taking a little, a little tactical break from that. So in terms of modern selling, you've seen all of these stats, certainly from kind of any modern CRM presentation that you've been looking at. And these are the things that are affecting kind of the sales leaders that we're talking to. So, customers are much more educated. They're, a large part of the way through their CRM buying cycle by the time they ever reach out to you. So that's something we're going to talk about today. Certainly, no matter what technology, and there's a plethora of technologies out there on the CRM side, sales reps feel their job is a lot more complex today, even with all of that technology. So what's adding to that complexity, and how can we help reduce that complexity? And then reps are spending, even today, with all of the technology that's kind of at the table and at the ready for everyone, they're still spending an inordinate amount of time on activities that aren't related to selling at all. So when we talk about how to make a quota-busting sales exec, and we'll talk about this in kind of a few frames, but I wanted to take a view of reps, managers, and I'll call it the C-suite. Now, when Apttus asked me to speak, I immediately went to my calendar in order to try and find something different to do. And I took a look at meetings I've had over the last 3-4 months. And what are the top things that we're talking to all of the constituents in those meetings about? So I kind of broke them down, and we'll talk about each one as we go through. So on the reps, certainly one of the main topics we hear is not working on the right leads. Whatever the process is that kind of gave that lead into the system, it's not the right one, or it's not working out. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we've done on the dynamic side to help out that process. Building relationships with power. This is still one of the, with all of the connection capabilities that we have, this is still one of the primary issues that are happening kind of in the world of sales. But mostly it's around staying productive. Microsoft's kind of unique in this realm. We really do think of CRM as a productivity platform. So what can we do in order to make reps, managers, C-suite, even admins and developers, how can we make them more productive? On the manager side, we'll talk about their big issues. And certainly the one we keep hearing over and over again is an accurate view of team activity. So this is, you've got the great CRM, you bought best of breed, but the problem is nobody's using it. So how does Microsoft think differently about adoption, and what tools do we kind of bring in order to help accelerate the use of CRM? Driving consistency, managers that are looking to deploy CRM to their sales reps are really focused on driving a consistent sales behavior, building the right telemetry, which powers the intelligence engine of the future. Consistency is a big deal. And also, there's a lot of change that's happening inside of teams. And with all the technology that we have, ramping new sales reps is still one of the primary concerns that a lot of managers are facing today. Then when we move to the C-suite, here's where we talk about, the C-suite doesn't care about execution, executing productively. They're really thinking about, how do I break out of the hours plus reps equals revenue model entirely? How do we move off into next generation selling? What can I employ? What can I do with the data that really separates and makes me different? They're talking about digital transformation. So we're going to focus on reps first. And think of this as your agenda, not working on the right leads, building relationships with power, and staying productive. So in terms of not working on the right leads, one of the things that we did with Dynamics 365 is we teamed up with a company called Versio. And what Versium does is they're collecting behavioral information for B2B and B2C customers. They've got their own huge warehouse, and they're collecting all of these behaviors. So what we did is we said, well, on the Microsoft side, we can certainly help you build a predictive model, but it's only really going to be looking at the information that you as an individual company have. How can we really exploit something different? How can we change the model? So what we've done is we've OEM'd, so this is included in your Plan 1 subscription cost, we've OEM'd the Versium capability and embedded that right into Dynamics. So now, from inside of Dynamics, you can take a list of opportunities and leads that you've closed, take your entire list, feed that up, and come out with a custom predictive model that you can then use to further score your opportunities and leads moving forward. So why this is different or why this is unique is because it's not just using data that you have about company A, B, and C. It's using information that Versium has. So it's building with that richer, higher fidelity data. It's building a lot more intelligence into that model. So now you've got a much richer view in terms of the lead scoring. Now, take that concept of lead scoring and building on the information, and what's the next piece of the puzzle that you really want to get to? And that's, I have my model. How can I actually reduce the acquisition costs of net new leads and use Versium and use inside of Dynamics 365, take that capability in order to essentially go out and purchase leads, compare them to your model. So now you know what wins. And you're trying to identify, well, I've got a set of leads, customers, I've got a segment that I'm really looking at and I really like. What can Versium give me in order to make that opportunity seamless? Still using your model, still using the capabilities that still using the capabilities kind of inside of Dynamics 365. So in terms of the rep itself, let's kind of imagine what we've just seen. Again, kind of all included in Dynamics 365. We've taken that, a set of data that you've had. We've augmented that with the, behaviors and capabilities that Versium is bringing to the table, provided that to you inside of Dynamics, and helped you reduce the acquisition costs of net new leads. So in terms of working on the right leads, this is how we're really trying to think about it differently and really thinking outside of your CRM. The next piece was building relationships with Power. And when it comes to building relationships with Power, the default connection tool is LinkedIn. I certainly don't know of any other tool, nor have I seen anything in the industry that absolutely everyone uses in order to establish connections, build their brand, get content out there into the world. And one of the core tenets, that we have is building that integration inside of LinkedIn. So currently, today, you can take that LinkedIn view, the customers, the connections that you have, and you don't have to exit Dynamics 365 in order to see that information. You can see that information from inside of Dynamics and make use of that LinkedIn connection information. Now, as we talk here today, we've got an event going on in New York where we're talking about the future of those integrations, where we're really trying to introduce what is the next level of LinkedIn integration, of business process integration, really around LinkedIn. And so when talk about building relationships with Power, this is the default tool. So we're not going to try and recreate it. What we're going to try and do is make it as immersive as possible. And as I kind of go through these things and talk about integrations, one of the things you'll hear me say a lot is immersive. And inside of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 world, what we're trying to do is make all of our integrations as immersive as possible. Really try and take what works in other areas, things like Versium, things like LinkedIn, and really try and build an immersive experience that cuts down on that productivity killer kind of cutting between applications. Unfortunate build slide, that one went over too far. But really what this is talking about is how to stay productive. And what we're trying to do with this is talk about some of the things around message tracking and analytics. So one of the typical problems that a sales rep deals with, especially with the educated customer, is that they're dealing with random journey maps. I've got a customer that essentially I've presented to, I'm taking them down what I'll call my standard qualification path, but I've got another customer that's well educated, that's jumping in the middle. So how am I juggling this, this information? I'm sending quotes to some, I'm sending initial emails to others, trying to arrange meetings with a third. So really when it talks about kind of that kind of disparate connection with a lot of these contacts, you need to know when is the best time to be able to respond to some of these to truly get to that next level productivity. And so what we've done is included in Dynamics 365, part of our relationship insights capabilities, is around message integration. So you see kind of 4 vignettes here, obviously one of them far too over to the left. But you're going to see that the one on the left there that's kind of disrupting your text, that's something that appears on your mobile. It tells you when somebody has opened an email. You sent them a proposal, not only do you know kind of when they opened it, so you can go, do you need an explanation? You know where they opened it. So did they take it to the board meeting like they said they were going to, or are they opening it late at night? Or the links on the content, do they keep reopening it? Part of this is building the telemetry over time so that you know how to communicate with this particular contact or that company. On the right-hand side, you see how that telemetry starts to manifest itself. So now you're building up a real behavior set around email openings in this particular contact. So I know exactly how they open email, what links they click on. Inside on that middle one, I know which emails they haven't opened. So all of the activities are listed. I know pretty immediately which ones they have or haven't opened. And at the top, I can see that recipient activity over time, which things they've opened, which things they've responded to. Now, the other area where we've truly kind of expanded, and I talked about it a little bit before, is this moves into relationship insights. And relationship insights is our machine learning on all of the telemetry that's happening based on messages, based on updates to CRM, even based on third-party information. So, as a sales rep, in order to be productive, I need to know exactly what I need to know when I need to know it. So you give me too much information, it'll make me unproductive. Give me too little and I won't be productive enough. So, you're seeing a gamut view of exactly what pops up via your Dynamics 365 mobile app. So you've got an example of things we can read into the exact text of the email. So we're registering intent. We know, for example, when there's a complaint and fostering that as a particular intent email. So am I creating a case? I can click individually and do that pretty immediately. Or are they responding to an email open? So I know exactly to respond back to them. So that piece is really driven from our machine learning around sentiment analysis. We take a look at some of the other ones, upcoming activities. So it knows I'm going, for example, to this Apttus conference. What are some of the customers in the area? What are some of the things it knows about CRM? And again, it only shows it to me as I'm going to the meeting. And relationship analytics, and then kind of even web enrichment. So when a company event is happening on a company that I have an opportunity for, how is it bringing that in and making that as obvious as possible to me? So that's our reps, and that's the kind of key productivity elements and just the issues that reps have been identifying. So what we're going to do now is take a look at managers, and again look at kind of from the agenda standpoint. Managers are caring about an accurate view of team activity. So managers have essentially bought a best-of-breed CRM, they've deployed it, but how do they drive that team to actually use it? How can we make it as invisible as possible? What about consistency? How do I get all of my reps, new, old, operating against a standard business process? And then we've got ramping new reps quickly. A lot of sales teams change a significant amount of reps every year. What are we doing in order to make it easier for the CRM to train them itself? So, first one I'll talk about is automatic data capture. And you saw a little bit of it with relationship insights and some of the statistics and analysis that we're gathering. But really, we've been on this journey with making CRM invisible to a rep since we started making CRM. It started with the Outlook plugins, and the user would still have to initiate that interaction, and that wasn't good enough. So then it went to a server-side synchronization. So now we're getting to a point where intelligence is starting to come into play. So when we talk about automatic data capture, what we want to do, or the point we're trying to get to, is to make it as immersive as possible in a single tool. So sitting inside of CRM, and it's good to kind of show that CRM screen, I can actually see the emails that have been sent out that aren't being tracked in my CRM, and I'm noticing that from inside the CRM. I'm not flipping back between my Outlook and the CRM in order to figure that information out. Conversely, on my mobile application, you're seeing something where I've opened an Outlook plugin. So on the mobile device, immediately it notices for the contact that I'm emailing what opportunities they're involved in, what accounts they're coming from. Now, where telemetry and machine learning are coming into play is really around some of those contacts. So let's say I'm answering an RFP, and the RFP contact was somebody in procurement. So it knows, based on emails, that actually who I've been communicating with is a VP of sales. They're the ones asking all the questions about our solution to the RFP. So then it's going to recommend stakeholders or account team members, conversely, and how to put those and recommend those based on that communication and based on that telemetry in order to update the CRM so it has the most accurate information. So the other thing is around consistency. So I've got a particular sales process, qualify, prospect. How am I guiding all of my reps through it? All of my reps through that process consistently. So what we did early on, and this is even way back in the CRM 2013 world of ours, we created what's called this business process UI. So that UI that you see, that chevroned list, is something that appears in every screen. So whether I'm on mobile, whether I'm on the desktop, kind of in the browser, it's giving me an idea of exactly where I am in the process, and as you can see, how long I've been in that process, in order to identify a nice, consistent area. It tells me exactly what fields I need to fill in order to move to the next stage. What's interesting about business process UI is that same business process can apply to anything. We're showing the example of sales here, but let's say you've got a complex account onboarding scenario where sometimes you go through a credit check, sometimes you don't. What we're able to do with the business process UI is you're training users that there's a nice visual representation that's easily identifiable on every screen. So whether your process involves sales, as it typically does, or account onboarding, or releasing a product. So now you've got these situations where, as a new user, I'm guided by this business process UI. I know exactly that it's going to tell me what I need to do next. Where this really comes into play is consistency, but also when you need to change your business process. So now imagine that your account onboarding situation's changed and your credit check rules have changed. And maybe you don't go through an internal qualification, you go through an external qualification. Being able to represent that and dictate that change through the business process UI helps people absorb and adopt it more consistently. The other area, kind of along that, training of reps, and how do we get the tool to actually train a rep itself? Most people that go through CRM deployments actually do, most people that are serious about it actually do a fairly good job of training their users and setting aside and dedicating the business process of change. So they've done all the right things in order to kind of set up and deploy their CRM. They've gone through and allocated all the right training budgets, and they've had their partner, the deployment SI, actually do the training and kind of leave them with the assets. And unfortunately, that's where it falls apart. So now that the customer is living with this, how do they build on that training? How do they remain consistent? When there's business process change, or when I have new reps, is there a defined onboarding experience? How do I give refreshers? All of those things become problematic. So what we've done is, this is a problem that Microsoft faced itself. So when you sign up for a training environment, we've always had, Dynamics is a complex product, we've always had problems where a customer might not know exactly the process to go through in order to see the product in its best light. So we invented the learning path process for that process ourselves. What we've done is that we've opened this up and we've created a full authoring environment and the ability for ISVs or individual companies to author it around their own process. So now if you've got that account onboarding process we talked about, so if there's a credit check or if there's things that need to be filled in on the screen, you can actually turn on Learning Path in order to help reps be able to kind of absorb that process as they use the CRM. So now it's no longer they go to training, then they do something for real. They can be trained as they're doing something for real. Now, again, we're talking about the manager here. All of this adoption, learning path, getting everybody to use it is nice, but then when push comes to shove, they need to be able to actually respond and say what is happening in their team. And this is where our view of embedded analytics comes in. So on the, you know, on the Microsoft side, we've created a lot of Power BI content packs that are specifically designed around sales and service that help specific roles, sales managers, sales reps, be able to come up to speed quickly on the data that's contained in CRM. And they can, but conversely, they can take these Power BI dashboards and embed them back into Dynamics. And what this allows them to do is a couple of things. Very typically, one of the answers with CRM reporting or any enterprise application reporting is that you have to bring the data into CRM in order to be able to see it. And what Power BI allows you to do is really represent the data and report on it from where it is. So Power BI kind of allows you to see opportunities versus actuals that maybe come from an ERP somewhere else. Take that consolidated view and bring that back into CRM. Another thing that this does, especially for managers, is it's no secret that managers and executives hate to use CRM. They need all the insights that the CRM data provides, but they really don't need to see the individual items that CRM represents, or at least not all the time. What they want is a dashboarding environment that's easily adopted, that you can question the data, that you can build from, that is already set up and ready to go. And so we've seen a lot of, certainly at the managerial and executive level, when we show Power BI, we've seen a lot of interest in making sure, or a lot of interest in the capabilities it provides without needing to go into CRM in order to see this information. Now, let's talk about kind of challenges that the C-suite has. So here, again, it's not about productive execution. It's really about how do I change the nature of sales in my organization beyond that reps plus hours equals money. So what am I doing differently? How can I use data as a way to differentiate? And when you start to talk about some of these aspects, you're really talking about digital transformation. So part of our pillars, and this is something I kind of purposefully didn't go into at the beginning, was really when we designed Dynamics 365 and we were trying to do something fundamentally different. How can people relate to their data very differently than they did in the past? And what we're trying to do is separate out from that kind of CRM or ERP world and make it a little bit more role specific, make it purpose specific. And the data is the data. And so here, when we talk about how do you use the data, how do you use intelligence, how do you digitally transform it to engage with your customers fundamentally differently? How do you empower your employees fundamentally differently? How do you use the information that you have? Optimizing operations. Intelligence is a huge factor in that. But how do you then take that intelligence in order to optimize your operations in a fundamentally different way than they're set up now? And transform your products. What you sell based on that data may be fundamentally different than what you sold before. So a great example of this I always use is Marston's. And Marston's is a pub in the UK. They've got 1,700 pubs kind of across the UK. And they have rooms, they sell beer, they sell food. And in terms of the pub industry, there isn't anything fundamentally different. So how do they digitally transform? How do they really move beyond an experience of heroics, where a particular waitstaff, particular manager, it's their heroics that are driving the differentiation? What do we do with data? What do we do in order to make that a little bit more consistent, gather a little bit more telemetry around it? So Marston's actually has no shortage of data. So this is a great example. They've got customer data. They grab that from kind of their own marketing department, all of their internal systems that they have. They use, they have table reservations for people that kind of reserve at a particular restaurant. They've got room reservations for people that reserve kind of the hotel rooms upstairs. They have separate system for customer surveys. They have a kind of loyalty and promotion package. So they've got, separate vouchers that are sent out. They use TripAdvisor, in order to gather that data. They've got weather. So there's all of these disparate pieces of data. But what they really want to do is connect them all together in order to drive an intelligent view of the pub's business and the individual. So this is the data they have. What can we do in order to help them make that differentiated? So the intelligence they want out of that is they want to understand fundamental levers of satisfaction. What really does make them happy? What makes them return? Is it guessing the right beer? Is it a good customer service? Or is it something different? Let the data tell you. Don't kind of make the assumptions and just do endless A/B testing. Lifetime value. Which customers should you focus on based on their lifetime value, based on all of that data? So it's not the people that spent a lot of money the one day when it rained, it's the people that's spent a lot of money in a lot of different areas of your business that may be hard to connect together. So typically when you see something like this, most companies think, oh, that's a huge BI effort. And so what Marston's was challenging us to do is take all of that data and you do it for me. I'll give you the data, you let intelligence determine what should connect. What are the KPIs that, I'll tell you the KPIs I want out of it, but really, essentially use the data to tell me something fundamentally different than I already know. So put that all into our customer insights product, and this is where they're coming to. So this is the dashboard of the typical pub manager. And as you can see on this individual dashboard, they've got, weather data that comes from an external source. It's no surprise that when it rains, pubs do horrible business. When it's good weather, they do just fine. They need to be able to understand that forecast as they start to plan other elements of their elements of the day. They want to know the rooms on inventory and see that information, all from one screen. They want to see kind of table bookings, all of those elements, TripAdvisor rating. So no longer do they have to go to TripAdvisor to bring that in. So we have a video of kind of our sponsor at Marston's that was going through this, and he talked about this process taking weeks, not months, not years, weeks. So it was a matter of using all of the assets that we had in order to bring kind of an intelligent view. Now, that doesn't just stop at the pub manager, get down to the individual. This is Paul. Paul is an individual customer. What do we know about the customer? Well, we've collected all this data from disparate sources. That journey map is automatically built. So we know exactly what triggers affected him along the way. When did he make the purchase at whatever, at the particular pub? Did he rent a room? Did he book a table? How did that change over time? Did he respond to a promotion? And as a sidestep, one of the areas that really brought it together for Marston's is they have Wi-Fi at all of their pubs. And they really wanted to turn anonymous into known. And so the best way that they found to do it is when you register for the free Wi-Fi, they would offer you a pint. So that got everybody registering for Wi-Fi. So now they were able to tell an enormous amount of data and tie it into individuals literally kind of sitting in the restaurant via beacon. So we also know all these other elements about Paul, but this is a bad screen. If I want to deal with Paul, he's only in the pub for the next hour, 2 hours. So the real goal of all of this was getting to a point where they had server-defined views of the customer. So as I'm approaching Paul, I now know how frequent he is, what his lifetime value is. Should I really be putting in the heroics? Is it worthwhile? I know what zone he likes to sit in this particular pub. I know what he orders, his favorite drink, and I can use this information to offer him real-time offers. Personalizing this experience is the differentiator that Marston's wanted to get to. So now they've taken something that's very known, retail, a retail experience at a pub, and they've changed it. So they've changed it where it's a personalized experience for all of their customers across the board. I timed that perfectly. So, in terms of what Dynamics 365 is, it kind of ends there. I'll be in and around the Microsoft booth if you want to come and talk to me. But what we saw here today was really just around, and I did this purposefully, tactically around the sales and the customer insights. There's other things offered as part of this Dynamics 365 experience. Everything from financials, we've partnered with Adobe to do something truly unique around marketing, field service, customer service. So all of these are part of the Dynamics 365 experience, all shared across a single platform of data so that they can share things like scheduling. Again, talk a long time around that. They have a common productivity platform with Office 365, and most importantly, a common analytics platform. So in terms of my time, that's it. But I really thank you guys for bearing with me.